Hey, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of the Beyond Seven Figures podcast. My guest today is a truly extraordinary human being. He's an award-winning business leader. He's an investor. He's a New York Times bestselling author. And while all of that is pretty cool, that is so far from where this guy started. Out of 965 freshmen in his class, he was only one of 235 seniors. And somehow, somewhere through a series of events, he didn't manage to go to a great college. He's the founder and CEO of Shift, which is a tech enablement management consulting firm. That's been nationally recognized, by the way. He's on a mission to change the way that we work. He's a general partner at the Conscious Venture Partners. He's a founder of Shift Society, a founding member of Hampton. Some people, their circumstances are they've been adopted. Other people, they lost their father, or their parents were abusive. They have learning disabilities. They're too tall. They're too short. They're too fat. They have no friends. They got bullied. They're not smart enough. All of us have stories. And for most of us, the difference between success and taking that leap to do what we know we should be doing, that barrier is those stories. Tell us, my man, your story and how you took that and overcame that to turn it into your superpower.
So first, before we get to that, I just want to say thank you. Like, sincerely, thank you. Because there are a lot of times I've done conversations with people that they just run through the script. And I know we've had a chance to spend a little bit of time before this conversation today, but, for you to really sink in and just try to get a sense of seeing me and acknowledging me and my path. And it just means a lot because, today actually marks November 2nd, the 23rd year that I've been doing Shift. Half my life, which is kind of crazy even to imagine. The way that you acknowledged me, the way that you saw me was actually the undercurrent of the whole story. Mm-hmm. And so as much as my story is about me, it's really about the greater we, because, there are all these other real big rock stars that played a big, meaningful part. And I think as you highlight that, I agree that some of us that have had maybe a tougher start or have had some traumatic moments, that making it mean not that life is happening to you, but it's happening for you, can sometimes be hard to get to unless you have people around you who have your back.
Wouldn't you argue that those people had your back because you created a situation that made them want to help you?
Yeah, I think you have to be an active student. You need to be someone who, is not a knower, is a learner. You need to be someone who is looking beyond the horizon that everyone else is. You need to be someone who shows up early and stays late and puts the extra elbow grease into whatever it is. Yes, I do think I made myself a worthy candidate of being mentored, of being guided, of being advised. And I've said this countless times, which is, resiliency is a thing that we all like to talk about. Angela Duckworth, her book, her TED Talk, it was great. I actually did an interview with her once. And I love the way that she unpacks this, because sometimes it's not what we think. It's not just pull yourself up from your bootstraps. In many cases, what she'll have found is that it's about interdependence. And for all the guys listening to this conversation right now, just think of it this way. When's the last time you asked for directions? Right? When's the last time you felt like you could reach out and ask for help? And I think, in the context of my story, I just got really fortunate that when an opportunity was presented, I really did my best to capitalize. And when the opportunity wasn't there, I did my best to not lose faith. Now, but the truth of it is I lost faith a lot. The truth of it is I was brought to my knees from a loss and a pain standpoint. I have been through an amazing amount of therapy, an amazing amount of self-work, an amazing amount of just deep healing to try to come out a little more whole and, try to use that to, yes, break some cycles of trauma, to show up for my kids and my wife and my lady and just be the best version of me. The death stuff that you talk about is whether you want to get it or not, is that life is short. So, we all have choice. And it's something that my dad instilled in me very early as a guy who worked in a blue collar environment. He just kept saying to me, you don't have to do anything. You get to do things, which back to the stories that you talked about. I think that's the story we tell ourselves, is that we have to do things, and we forget that. I think the real game that we're all trying to play is, what do we get to do? And then even more importantly, what do we want to do?
You've got a lot of different businesses. You work with a lot of very high-end entrepreneurs, and you're an investor in a whole bunch of different companies and so forth. But right now, I'm sure you're hearing the stories that are coming up. And a lot of gurus are claiming a recession, worse than the Great Depression, AI, the disruption with AI, and losing jobs and losing business and all this other stuff. So there's so many things right now, energies right now, more than I can remember in a long time, that is really taking people and polarizing them in two different directions. Tell me what you're seeing right now, the difference between the stories that your most successful entrepreneurs, the most successful businesses that you've invested in, how their stories are different than everybody else's.
I agree that there is a quickening, as a friend of mine says. There are all of these things happening. I mean, just take the last 5 years alone. We had a global pandemic. We had a war or two. You have a climate change or thing happening. In fact, I saw Neil Tyson deGrasse say this recently. They keep saying that Earth is this perfect mix of factors and variables to present life. And he said, no, it's not. There's been 5 extinction events on this planet we know of. And I think we sometimes forget that, like, in the last 45 to 50 years, you and me and the rest of us, everybody listening to this, has experienced more change than the last 100,000 years of human existence. That all of this is sort of rapidly moving. And so there's a pace of change, there's a pain of change. And then, to your point, there's possibility. And you could reduce this down to the entrepreneurs or executives that I see that are killing it. They're looking forward and saying the best is yet to come. Mm-hmm. Anything is possible. We're capable of the unthinkable. And I think there's some wisdom also needed to back those words up. Things like, how about many things can be true? The reason that we stay away from politics and religion is because we weren't given the opportunity to think that many things could be true, right? And I think what we're learning as a species in some ways is nuance is important. Everything is situational. There are very few things that are black or white. And yet, when you think about what we did 100 years ago during the Industrial Revolution, we mass produce things. We mass produce education, which was really memorization. So we've been programming ourselves to basically not think. This is really the basis of my next book. We have an authority bias. We keep looking up. What should I do next? What's good for you? What do you trust about your own intuition, your own inner guidance in this moment? And yes, let's learn from each other. Let's hear how people experience things, but not in a way that we're trying to preach, teach, give advice, follow me, build a church, need followers. I am the way. This is like the Mandalorian, the opposite. It's like, there are many ways. I like winning. I don't like I like learning, but I like learning quickly. And I am, building a new set of skills that I have not built yet before. And I think in a lot of ways, what we're all maybe kind of experiencing together is that, if during the pandemic, if the government had just said these 2 words, regardless of where you stand on this issue, on all of it, they had just said, this is what we know. Watch this. You ready? For now. We reserve the right to accept new information and adjust as we move forward. And I think, there's something I think about real quick that it really, I think, is important is that, one of the things that I think is that we're all struggling with when we think about the big universe and we think about what this whole thing about in terms of life is, like, we know things for sure, kind of. Like, we just found out that the universe is not 13.8 billion years. So we send up the Hubble telescope back in the 90s. We sent up the James Webb telescope, I think it was last year. They do a Netflix documentary about this. We all learned that the universe is 13.8 billion years. I mean, there's a fundamental thing. We assume that is an answer that is correct. That goes out in June, the Netflix documentary. I'll watch it. It's amazing. It's a cool story. Who doesn't like thinking about what else is out there? 2 weeks after it goes out, there's a new release that says, oops, guess what? It's twice as old. It's 26 billion years. Yes, we know nothing. So one of the things I would just, offer to people is the word uncharted. It's like we're all experiencing this very moment for the first time together. We've never done this conversation. We've never been on this November 2nd and doing this thing in this exact moment. So just acknowledge that we're all doing our best to figure this out. And sometimes our best is not good enough, right? Those stories that you talk about, sometimes they get in a way of, it's a limiting factor or it's a stuck narrative that, has something to do with that hole in the soul that we talked about. But the lesson for me continues to be, it's a look in the mirror moment. And it's also a look beyond where you think you could ever go.
One thing that I want to touch on, when we talk about the different stories and how things can go. So when I was a kid, I was diagnosed as having one of the worst cases of learning disabilities that the doctor had ever seen back in the day. She said I had almost every case of dyslexia, except for seeing things, scrambled up and whatnot. And then there's a whole list of other learning disabilities. And she's telling this to my mother as I'm there. And she looks at my mom. She goes, for the life of me, I can't understand how he's able to function in a normal school. And my mother must have intuitively picked up on this, but she changed my story in a heartbeat. She was very intuitive. It was, you could go back and say that was arguably one of the most critical, pivotal moments of my life. She said, well, the reason why you've been able to function in these schools is you actually happen to have one of the highest IQs that they've ever seen before. See, your IQ is so smart that you've been able to teach yourself and you've been able to do things. You have a gift she's never seen before. And I was like, really? Yeah, you might not learn the same way as the other kids, but you figured other things out that they can't. When we look at our future, my fundamental belief is that the advantage is going to end up going to the person or the people that ask the better questions will get the better answers. And that's just not a theory. With AI and what we're seeing right now, and we're going to see this integrating more and more in our lives, the quality of the input is directly related to the quality of the output. And when you ask questions and you go to second level thinking, third level thinking, and so forth, that output changes the whole game, changes the entire game. So I do think that in order to put yourself in a place where you're going to ask the better questions, you have to believe that there's something more than just the first thing you heard.
Yeah. Well, I think you're hitting on a bunch of things that I would give like a hell yes to. I mean, the idea that, and I don't remember who said it, you probably remember, is like the quality of your questions determines the quality of your life. It feels like a Tony Robbins quote.
Or Jim Rohn or something like that. Yeah.
And I think, again, in school, we were never like given a reward for the best question. We were given a reward for answering the question to the test. So it's almost flipped in reverse, right? You're looked at as a troublemaker or a disruptor. And then you take that disruptor and put them in corporate America. And then you're the chief innovation officer for a big company, right? Yeah. So I do think like what we're learning is that conformity and convergence, there's a time and a place, but it might also be time to divert. Sometimes it's not about having the answer ever. It's about the exploration. The word question, the root of it is quest. It's a journey of exploration. It's a journey of self-discovery. It's a journey that will be unique to you. And I think we can sort of maybe fall more in love. I know there's a big thing about the journey and the destination, but I do think that this is sort of that in a different format, which is, can you fall in love with not knowing? Can you fall in love with the idea of the questions and how the questions might lead you to different places or different spaces, or how, maybe what you want to be the answer will not be the answer. And I think that happens to a lot of entrepreneurs who sell their businesses. They think the answer is hit the bell, pull myself out of the matrix, have this project freedom is what I call it when I'm working with folks. But I see a lot of them really go through that dark valley of depression because they've sort of unplugged from the game, the stakes, the action, the adrenaline, but more so the relationships, the community. It's like what they forgot was that was a invisible force. And so I think like this moment, it's like it does give us a chance to to maybe rethink or redo or reset or whatever your favorite way to sort of get there is. It's like, look, I think, this is a scary moment in a lot of ways because it unwinds certainty. And we, as human beings, we almost have to create those stories. And I think in a lot of ways, our capacity to imagine beyond the current realm of thinking is, I think, hopefully what you and I get a chance to see in our lifetime because of AI, because of the speed of which we might be able to, you're exactly right, maneuver through these different knowledge journeys and learning journeys and wisdom journeys.
So let's stay on this AI conversation for a little bit, because I do think it's important as we move into the future and correct the story. Let's talk about the possibilities. On one hand, you're going to find people learning at a rate faster than they have ever learned before. I may be going for a walk with the dog. I'll pull out my ChatGPT 4 app. I'll turn on the voice command and I'll say, hey, why don't you teach me a little bit about Innovator's Dilemma? Okay, no problem. Here it is. And then I can interact and I can dialogue. Oh, and then it's like, cool. Okay, so then it just all of a sudden did this. Or then you could turn around and go, I wonder what Jeff Bezos would think. Or we've done some things is we've actually created a situation where I've created two people who have debated back and forth with each other just to be able to sit there and watch and be like, oh my God, look what's going on. But what I'm doing and what everybody has access to is it's learning. But when you talk about expanding that possibility, we're expanding what's possible. The more we learn, the more we realize how much we don't know. And that is how we expand our knowledge, because it's what we don't know that opens your eyes to possibilities, because you're asking different questions. And so long as you continue to look at, what am I not seeing? What else could this be? How else could this do this and that? It's infinite.
And as I'm listening, I'm contemplating how I'm thinking about it. And I'm sort of internally processing some of it, because this is a big subject. I have been down this rabbit hole for about 10 years personally, both in building, but also in investing and watching and learning and studying and teaching and training. I went to TED this year. I saw Greg Brotman, one of the founders of Open.ai, get up and do the whole thing. And everybody's like, wow, I can't believe what this thing's going to be. And it was ChatGPT first. It was like right before they released it. The opportunity is nuts. This is a chance for all of us to move faster and faster and faster. One small footnote, though, that I heard Chamath on the All In podcast, which I've just come to really appreciate. I don't know if you've listened to that podcast. There's one of the four characters there. His name is Chamath. And he said his belief about AI at the individual level is that once it becomes ubiquitous, it's just like computers. They've measured productivity before and after the personal computer, and it actually hasn't. Once it's out, the advantage goes away because we're all using it. So I think what I hear you saying and a lot of others, which is like, but you can get an early start. And that doesn't mean you can be even more forward leaning. And I think that's definitely the right way to think about it. And so I think like the idea that we should just be thoughtful about what this could be is something that we should be thinking about, because we've in the last 100 years created technology where fingers that are on buttons right now that could be in a really sort of misunderstanding, miscommunication, and a mistaken way, we could end up doing really dumb things. So I do think it's a little weird to try to work through. But look, at the base level, between you, me, the fence post, and everybody else, it's just, I think AI is an unlock. I think it's an amazing time to be alive. And I do think like what you're talking about could be one of the most important things that AI can do for us, besides the mundane and unlocking more creative time and more value creation, is scenario planning and steel manning and red teaming your point of view. I think a lot of what you're talking about in terms of stories are ultimately just blind spots. They're biases. They're default modes that don't allow us to see, something that might be emerging right before our eyes. We used to share this video 20 years ago when we were doing a lot of like leadership work. Have you ever seen the gorilla with the basketball? There's a white jersey team and then a black jersey team. And so what you tell the audience, you say, hey, I want you to count how many times the white team passes the ball. So they start passing the ball. There's no sound, and the white team's intermixing with the black team, and you're like trying to catch the ball and where it's going. Now, meanwhile, a gorilla walks through the screen, pounds its chest, and then keeps walking through. And at the end, you say, well, how many times did the white team touch the ball? And everybody's like 16 and 13 and 22 and 28. And then someone says, what about the gorilla? And everybody's like, what are you talking about? And then you kind of like, you ham it up a little bit. And next thing you know, a couple other people, if there's 100 people in the room, 15 people have seen the gorilla, and the other 85 think they've been smoking something funny.
Yeah.
Then you play back the video and you see the gorilla. And so this is, again, what we focus on. I think what your message that I'm learning today is like what we focus on, we find. Right. Yep. Sometimes we have very, very neat compartments that we put things in. I think we also have selective attention, selective focus, selective, as much as we are infinite in terms of what we want our being to be. I know the challenge for me sometimes is to go with, but I only got, 24 hours in a day. That forces a decision of finite time, finite energy, finite resources. And with the way that we just we absorb the signals and the signs today. So
Crazy.
Like, think about the selective outrage here. Like you and I are brothers, my brother. We came from the same thing. Like we essentially have been procreating to keep the thing going and all these features and facets. It's like, it's a trippy thing to think about. And I think lineage thinking is fine, or do what's best for your family. But look, at the end of the day, we're still stuck on this rock hurling through the universe trying to figure this fucking thing out.
Sure.
And I think, yeah. So anyway.
So to your point, there are things that we can control and the things that and if you think about it, what it really is frustration? What is frustration?
Your inability to figure it out.
Yeah. Right. So it's your inability to figure it out. It's the feeling like you have no control over the outcome.
Right.
Right. What's anxiety?
Your fear of a future event.
And it was a Voltaire or somebody that said we spend most of our life worrying about things that never end up happening to us. Right. And so it's like, we have frustration, we have anxiety, all this stuff, right? All of that, if you think about it, the foundation behind it all is this understanding that we can't control it. And because we can't control the outcome, we get all these negative feelings.
Right.
So let's change the story. What can I control? And when we focus on what we can control, the question that I like to ask is, why is this the best thing that could happen to me right now? That makes sure that I take a negative situation when I'm like, why is this the best thing that could happen to me right now? And I control what I believe I can. Like, why is this the best thing that can happen to me right now? It changes it into, what is the solution that I'm creating as a result? Even in team environments, when total shit hits the fan, it's like, why is this the best thing that could happen to you right now? I am going to repeat myself until you give me at least an answer.
Right.
Well, because it will force us to better look at our metrics. So it's like, it's interesting, even when we're focusing on like the things that, we can control. I had another fascinating discovery today that I just remembered, and I want to share. I know we're pushing against the clock, that I think is also important. Not only is it the things that we can control, but sometimes we think we need to have all the answers. Like, we just think we have to have all the answers, especially the game that you play and I play. And we work with some of the smartest people on the planet. And, we can tend to put a lot of pressure on ourselves to feel like we have to be the ones to come up with the answers, because that's why they're paying us the big bucks.
Right.
A CEO said to me something this morning. It's the first time that I heard it in this way in the 14 years since I've been doing this. And he said, so Charlie, what I believe makes you different than everyone I've ever spoken to. And I was like, what's this? And he said, every consultant, every coach I've ever talked to met with me and said, here's the strategy. And I'm thinking to myself, well, isn't that what I do? And he goes, what you did is you went all the way down and asked different questions, and you found one little thing in the company that nobody had ever seen before. That changed everything. It was asking a question that we never thought to ask ourselves. I hate to cut this short. Real quick, where can people find out about you and your books and so forth?
First, you're the man. Thank you for doing this. Number one, go to joemechlinski.com. I'll send that over to you guys. And shiftthework.com. Shift is the name of our company. Shift the Work happens to be the name of the book, and I figured I'd do a little double on that. So yeah, it was a really lovely conversation. I, again, start with a big thank you for having me on, and look forward to keep getting to know you, man.
That'd be great. I will tell everybody here too that Joe really has some great content on his social profiles. You'll see a lot when he's speaking on stage. He's got some great little sound bites and so forth. I do encourage you, follow him on social, Joe Mechlinski. You'll see him on Twitter, you'll see him on Instagram, so forth. Follow him. You're going to see that the value train continues over there. So that wraps up today's episode of the Beyond Seven Figures podcast. As a reminder, for more tips, strategies, and information on taking your company beyond seven figures, check us out, predictableprofits.com. Again, predictableprofits.com. This is Charles Gadet with my friend Joe Mechlinski, and I will see you in another episode.